Something that AI has made really clear to me is that no amount of tooling or technology actually makes an organization go faster or do better. In fact, the pressure that this level of change that we see in 2026 has put on human beings has been called the human wreckage of AI. So it's always a pleasure when I meet other people who are as interested in the human side of technology and the human side of business as I am. So one day I'm cruising around LinkedIn, and in a time where people are having such a hard time getting hired and companies are having a hard time finding the right people, here was a person who was doing something simple. She was reaching out via social media to find people that she could start developing relationships with to fill a role that she wasn't hiring for today, but would be soon. Finding fit between people and the organizations that they serve by creating real human connection. So I reached out to her and said, you should be on the show because we're really talking about the same things. Her name is Angela Dugan. She works for a company called Red Foundry, and you're going to meet her today. Find out why she works the way she does and why it matters so much right now. That's this week on the Badass Agile podcast.
Greetings, team. Welcome to the Badass Agile podcast. I'm your host, Chris Williams.
Angela Dugan, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's gorgeous in Chicago. We've finally hit, I think, legitimate spring because we go back and forth between spring and winter a lot in March, April, and May. So I think we're finally in spring.
Yeah, try Canada sometime. We have winter and construction. That's all we get here.
That sounds familiar, being in Chicago. I think we have a lot of gripes there to share.
Twin cities, basically.
Yeah, yep.
So first of all, welcome to the show. I'd like for readers, listeners to hear how I met you. You were, through some mutual connection on LinkedIn, you posted an ad for, see if I get this right, product delivery manager?
Yep.
But you posted it in a unique way. In a time when most people are complaining or hurting from the fact that they're sending out hundreds, if not thousands of resumes for a job, if every role has hundreds of applicants, and if many of those positions being posted maybe are not even real positions, they're not scams, but it could be people fishing for interest or seeing what kind of rates grab people. There's a lot of feeling invisible happening in our industry and maybe even in hiring in general. What was so refreshing about what you did is that you put the word out about a position you weren't even hiring for yet, but you were looking to meet people who might fit. Now, we'll get into your company and your history in just a couple of minutes, but I'm a big believer that when we do things, everything we do is creation. When we speak, when we do a podcast like this one, when we go on YouTube or social or LinkedIn, when we speak to people in person, we create ripples. Everything we do and say has some kind of an effect on the people and the things around us. And I learned that, part of having kids is when you see your kids telling jokes that you would laugh at, you realize how much of a dent you've made on another human being just by being in their presence. And so those influences that we create, those ripples that we make, affect people positively or negatively, or sometimes not at all. And I find that so much of the things we put out there is negative or neutral. Whereas you stepped onto the scene and said, there's a different way to fill positions. And that is to meet people, take a genuine interest in them, see if they take a genuine interest in us, build a relationship. And then we can evaluate which role we're going to give to whom or who's going to work with us in the future that way, rather than asking for a paper exchange. Show me your resume. I'll run it through the computer. We'll see if there's a match. For some companies, that might seem impossible, but I would say that this is a more human way of doing human resources. And so I was impressed, and I reached out to you and said, could you come on the show and just talk about who you are and how you got to be that person? So let's start with, what's the state? Just a real quick intro. What is the state of hiring and jobs in technology right now, at least from your corner of the universe. And what was this unique approach that I got to bear witness to? Do you know that you're changing things by doing that? And does that matter to you?
Oh man, that's such a fantastic question. And we'll probably get into this later, but it kind of speaks to who I am as a person. Like doing some navel gazing with my own coach once, we kind of dug in on my core values, and the two that really resonated with me were authenticity and service to others. And so I feel like everything I do is through that lens. And good or bad, I wear my heart on my sleeve. Um, Good or bad, I want to help. I always come at everything from a place of helping. And the state of jobs right now, it's unsettling. Like that is the best word I could come up with, because I've been through that myself. I have a lot of friends who, in the technology industry are people that I look up to, people that I see as folks that I maybe idealized at one point in my career, and watching them struggle is so hard.
Mm.
And I've been pretty fortunate, but I would say that the fortune comes from, maybe something we'll talk about later, which is my desire to always want to stay connected and to build this really strong network. And so I've been pretty fortunate in my own job searches. And my goal is always to be the best representation of what that looks like. Is, don't take the shortcuts. Do the things that really matter, and that make the kind of impression that make people want to stay connected and make people want to work with you or advocate for you. And I feel like those are the things that kind of drove me to what you reached out to as a very unique approach. And I'll talk about that very briefly. I'll be honest, I was a little nervous about making that post because it felt so vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And so counter to everything I'd been seeing. I really wasn't sure how people would react. And I found myself in this place where I was like, listen, I'm at a small company. I don't know when I'm going to have an open role, because I have to look at future business and I have to look at allocations because we're a consulting firm. And I just don't know when a role is going to open. But what I do know is I can't wait until I already desperately need someone to start the process, because even though I strive to keep like the whole recruiting process pretty short from a overall timeline perspective, we're still talking weeks and not days, and certainly not hours. And so my unique approach was just to put that out there. Like, I think I even started by saying, hey, this is super awkward or super vulnerable. And I don't know when I'm going to have a role, but I do know I want to start meeting people, and I want to talk to you, and I want to find out if you'd even be interested in my wonderful little corner of tech in Chicago. Because if you are, then when I do have an open role, we can move that much faster through the rest of the process. And, we won't end up stressed out. We won't end up rushing, and it gives us an opportunity to get to know each other. So you can decide if you even want to keep talking to me. So that's what I did. And the amount of responses, I didn't get hundreds. I got dozens of responses,
Mm-hmm.
but it was extremely fast. And every single person I talked to said it's so refreshing to talk to a human. And I really loved the way you approached it. I could tell that I already would kind of appreciate you as a human.
So for any HR people that happen to be listening, not to tell you how to do your jobs by all means, and not to disrespect your approaches and your methods and your profession, but we can learn something here. The times are changing, whether you like it or not. And we can learn from perhaps more nimble organizations who have the luxury to try things like this and see if it works. And a couple of notes came up as you were speaking. One is that for job seekers, take this same approach. Because if you're waiting until you absolutely need a job, until you absolutely can't go any longer without a paycheck, you are bumping into a runway that you yourself won't be comfortable with. It makes sense throughout your career while you're employed to reach out and build relationships with folks like Angela. And that way you have something in your back pocket, you have people to reach out to when the time comes for a change. And opportunities tend to gravitate more toward you because your ears are open for it. And I think that's a better strategy than treating job searches as transactional. I need a role, I post a role. I need a job, I'll submit my resume. Doing some of this back work can be really, really helpful and give you an advantage when the time comes to look for a role, especially in strained environments, economic environments like this one. But the question that popped up for me was, do you think this is becoming more important in the age of AI? You mentioned the word authenticity. And some of the banter back and forth is that authentic connection and authentic skills, real human skills, will either be as much in demand or perhaps more so in the age of AI. Do you believe that to be true?
I 100% believe that to be true. Now, I'm not saying people can't be successful leveraging AI or taking an approach where maybe those things aren't important. I think it comes down to what do you appreciate and what do you need as a human. And, I'm gonna be honest, like I'm turning 52 this year. And in the last probably 4 to 5 years of my career, I've realized that those things that I value, right, being able to do service to others and work at a place where service to others is important, where authenticity is appreciated, is so important to me. It's something that I personally value and is a deal breaker to not have either of those things at any company that I want to go work for. And so when I see companies that are leveraging AI, and I get it, right? I assume, right? I'm not actually in HR, but I assume that a lot of HR folks are feeling pressure to leverage AI to move
Mm-hmm.
through things faster, to process more resumes faster, to find quote unquote higher quality candidates using AI. But it takes a lot of the things that I value out of the equation. And so when I see companies who leverage that, they immediately go on my do not engage with them list, because they're, to me, how you show yourself when you're in the recruiting posture, when sometimes you're talking to people at their most vulnerable, how you show up in that conversation tells them what they need to know about that company. Whether you realize it or not, you are the face of that company, and they're looking to you to see what they can expect when they join the company. And if what they can expect is auto rejection, super, super high efficiency at the cost of humanness and humaneness, that's going to automatically narrow down the people who come to you. And it may not be the candidates who value the things you want them to value. So that's kind of the way I look at it. Is I want people to know from the very beginning that if they're looking at Red Foundry as an option, this is how they can expect their experience to be. It's very personal. It's very humane. It's very, very service oriented and generous, because that is how we want people to act when they join our company as well.
And for what it's worth, my opinion of your company went up immediately, having seen your post and reached out to you and spoken with you. That if anyone said to me, do you know of any companies that'd be just great places to work? I'm looking to meet new people. I would be more likely to send them your way than I would to someone who posts a job description for an immediate hire, but like they left their AI prompt in the job description, that sort of carelessness or the
Yeah.
transactional nature of hiring as it is today. So it's working. The stuff that you're doing is great for your company's brand, but I think you'll attract better people as a result. You mentioned your company, Red Foundry. Let's back the truck up for a second. Tell me a little bit about where you came from, how you landed at this organization, and what they do, if you're comfortable.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. My career through tech has been very windy. It's like wandering through a beautiful garden and discovering new things all the time. And I started out in engineering. My background was computer science. I spent a lot of time building software through small consulting firms, really not that different than Red Foundry. That was my start. I eventually found my way to Microsoft. I was an evangelist at the time. I was trying to build out my speaking chops, and I was an extrovert, and it gave me an awesome opportunity as a tech evangelist to meet people, to help solve problems, to get people excited. It's funny because I feel like if you looked at any of the assessments I've taken, right, I'm a helper, I'm a protagonist, I'm an ENFP. Sometimes those last couple of things flip, but I'm all about enthusiasm and helping and connectedness. So that was a great job. I did that for a while. I then ended up back at a small company again because I wanted to have more more human connection, more focus on solving problems in smaller spaces. And so I went back into a small company. Gosh, I was there for 12 years. I stayed at small companies and it was great. I moved from being an Agile and DevOps technologist to becoming the head of people. And that was kind of my foray into people leadership and what I now call messy people stuff. As a small company, we didn't have a separate HR department. And so I was asked to head up recruiting and hiring and performance and career paths. And it was wonderful. I did that for 10 years. Company got bought by another company. Ultimately, it ended up not being a good fit for what I was looking for at that point in my career once we got into a much larger company again. And I ended up taking a 9-month sabbatical to really look at what did I want to do with the rest of my career. At that point, I was about to turn 50. I knew I wanted to spend the next 10 to 12 years of my career, hopefully, before retirement, doing something that really felt good, that helped me make an impact. Because to me, making positive differences in people's lives is a big part of what I now value about what I do. I ended up finding my way back to Microsoft. I had a lot of old friends at Microsoft that wooed me back, and I found a position with state and local government that I really enjoyed because my team's whole mission was helping to bring technology to places like, Health and Human Services, Social Security Department, the Department of Motor Vehicles, making positive differences to constituents' lives, right? Like my neighbors, my grandma, my friends. I loved that. And ironically, I was laid off from that position last summer when Microsoft first started to really double down on their AI investment and started cutting headcount. So I always kind of joke that it was ironic that quote unquote AI took my job. It really didn't, but that was kind of the wave, right? All the investment was going into AI. They were trying to figure out how to be more efficient. And so that meant less people managers. And I found myself very unexpectedly going, oh my, because when I was on my sabbatical looking, it was hard, right? I ran into a lot of auto rejects, a lot of people not answering emails, a lot of, your resume has gone in with 500 others for a position that just opened. So it was unsettling, and I'll be honest, I was scared and a little nervous about what that was going to mean for me. And to kind of tie this up in a bow, one of the things you mentioned early on that I want to call back up because it's something I definitely talk to people about is putting that investment into keeping your connections, because that human connection matters. And when I got laid off from Microsoft, right, I had some severance, I had some time to look for a new role, but of course, knowing what I was walking into was very intimidating. But at the same time, I have spent my whole career trying to help others, trying to create connections for others, using my network connections to help other people find jobs. And so what happened was, I think within 2 days of being laid off, all I had done was responded to someone else's post on LinkedIn saying, I really felt a lot of empathy for how they felt because they were part of that same layoff wave at Microsoft that I was, and I knew them. And I replied, and someone in my network saw my reply. She is now my boss. Her name is Carrie Clune, and she's the CEO of Red Foundry. And she is a wonderful human. And she is a woman that I met back when I was a consultant, back in like 2014 at that first small company I went to after I left Microsoft the first time. I consulted for her. And we had such a good experience with me doing that consulting that we said, just because my engagement is ending, we don't have to stop talking to each other. And we became friends and we stayed connected. We had lunches. I supported her through her career moves. She supported me through my career moves. And when I found myself unemployed, I didn't even know that she had been thinking about me for a while and just looking for an opportunity to be able to work with me again. And so I was so fortunate to have that timing work out that she almost immediately started talking to me about the role, which I now have at Red Foundry as the Vice President of Product Delivery.
Wow. It's an important lesson, because I've noticed in making the shift in the past couple of years from contractor, which is, you can get poached as a contractor. People can reach out to you and say, we need X. I heard you have X. Can we talk? But when you're an entrepreneur, you pretty much have to do most of the outreach yourself. whether that's through marketing or whether that's through straight on sales, calling people you know, people you don't know. And there's a difference. It's a different feel. And I think most people in the tech world are not used to doing that outreach. But I did notice that when I go through my LinkedIn contacts, I have a practice of just reaching out to people that I worked with before and enjoyed working with, and I think enjoyed working with me. And I reach out and I don't ask for anything. I just say, hey, I'd love to connect and hear where you're at now. Often they've changed jobs. Certainly I might have been doing different things. But if I don't do that, those people, those very same people, rarely reach back out. Now, that's not a condemnation. It's an indicator of how busy people are or how uncomfortable they might be with reaching out cold and saying, I'd love to reconnect and hear what you're up to. Or they just don't think of it. It's not top priority. Work is busy. Life is busy. So I'm not condemning people for not doing it, but I do know that if you don't take the initiative and do it, nobody will. And you can get really comfortable with that reality. Not having spoken to people that you used to see every day for years. And then if you only contact them when you need something, it tends to sour the conversation a bit. So this is something that's going to be uncomfortable for most people to do or unnatural, but you must do it for specifically that reason. Because if you do it, it pays dividends massively, and your story is kind of living proof, if you will. I was going to ask you about your last experience when you were applying for a job, but I think you kind of covered that as you were speaking. So I'll move on to my next question if I could. What are you doing now? What's the work that you're doing as vice president of product? Did you say it was product delivery or VP product?
Product delivery. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Product delivery.
So explain that role to us, because it's important for Agile people to know two things. One, your role doesn't define you. So if you were traditionally defined as Agile coach or Scrum Master, you may not see postings for that job anymore. It doesn't mean that your skills aren't valid, worthwhile, and in demand elsewhere. They're just going to come under a different label. So I would love for people to understand what that role is, how it's similar or related to the work that you did when you said you were in Agile and DevOps. And I'll stop there. I forgot the second thing was I was going to ask. Let me just put that question in front of you. What are you doing now? What is that role definition? What's your day-to-day like?
Yeah. Oh my God. And I love the way you asked that question, because it would have been easy for me to stick with, let's look for Scrum Master roles, let's look for Agile coach or Agile lead or something with the word Agile in it, because I've been so used to that describing me as a person for so long. Mm-hmm. And I worked with, I have a coach myself. I feel like a lot of people out there who've been Agile coaches or in peripheral roles to that, a lot of us have our own coaches because we understand how important it can be to have an outside perspective. And I remember that being the game-changing advice when I was looking for a role while on sabbatical, which was stop looking for your past roles. Look for roles that align to the activities you want to do, the outcomes you want to drive, and the impact you want to have. And that really changed things for me. I never would have applied for that Microsoft state and local government role had I not thought differently about the impact I can have and the skills that I bring to the table. Because a lot of times there's roles out there that need people who can think about the impact of process on organizational culture and effectiveness, that can think about how we communicate and how we stay aligned, being a driver of success. And those are the skills that I really leaned on that helped me get a director role at Microsoft and then a VP role at Red Foundry. In addition to certainly relationships like we talked about, it ended up being an alignment of the things that they had seen or heard of me being able to do regardless of my title. And that made a really big difference. And so to loop this back to the VP of product delivery, we're a really small company compared to Microsoft. So we're talking, 40 people, not 200,000 people. But what matters at the end of the day is we are a growing company. We're being impacted by AI just like everybody else. But the reason I was brought in is because I'm very culture centric. I'm very people first. And I think about that with everything I do. And I want to make sure that our team members can grow and thrive and have amazing experiences and be proud of the work they're doing. I also want our clients to be raving fans because they feel the pride that we take in our work and the collaboration and the I like to call it teaminess that we bring to everything we do. And so I was brought in to head up the product delivery manager team. So think of them as kind of agile project managers. Where we have to run projects. Contractually obligated to hit certain milestones and dates and prices, but people are reasonable, and so we essentially take a project management approach with an agile mindset, and it works really well for our customers. It works well for our teams. It allows us to embrace change as we need to, but not throw out the things that makes for a productive and profitable consulting business, because there are certain realities of consulting that can make it difficult to do, if we're calling like quote unquote like pure Scrum or real Agile. And so that's part of the reason I was brought in, is they want to make sure that as we grow, we can change, we can adapt, but we do so in a way that respects our culture, that respects the real boundaries of what have to be in place when you're paid by the hour and you're contractually obligated to hit certain things.
I'll draw to a couple of important things that I heard you say. One was that agile people are impact people. That's something that I noticed in all the years doing the podcast, or all the years meeting people in this space, is that the best agile coaches and scrum masters did the job because of the impact they were going to make, usually on the people around them, like the teams they hovered over, but also the companies that they work for and the people they serve, the end customer. If they could understand or wrap their heads around the impact, the difference that they were making for those people, they were happier and they performed better. If they just took the agile coach job because they were looking up an index of high paying jobs, then they were more likely to not do as well. So it's fair to say that agile people are impact people, and that's something you keep saying over and over: impact, impact, impact. So it further strengthens the hypothesis, but also it should validate for people that if you're in the business to help somebody, to serve teams, to serve the company that pays for those teams, to serve the people that pay the company, if you can see that person clearly and have a desire to make their life better or their experience better, you're onto something. You're employable. Part one. And the other thing you mentioned a couple of times, you mentioned it once really, you said something about influence. The ability to influence, presumably influence your teams, but also influence executives and managers to help support your cause. A lot of what we do in Agile is different. It's not status quo. And so it requires orchestrated, well-supported efforts, or it flops. We know that. The number one reason why Agile initiatives fail is lack of executive understanding and or lack of executive support, point blank. Running the forges I have, the number one reason why people come in and the number one thing they say they loved coming out was learning what really makes influence work. You can't influence with fear, consequences. You can't really influence with, promised benefits. So carrots and sticks don't really work. Right. Influence comes from a very different place. There's a science to it, yes. There's a psychology to it, of course. And there's mechanics to it. But your inner game kind of has to be right before you go and influence, or people will see right through you. And so learning how to influence really well, really effectively, is a skill that not everybody has. And I was curious, did you have to develop that over time? You mentioned you were an extrovert. I don't think everyone who's a Scrum Master is an extrovert. Even though it feels like they should be, I think a lot of times they grew up in the tech room and they loved the technology. They probably got into it, so they didn't have to spend a lot of time doing sales or, engaging with others or having high stakes conversations. They'd rather just kind of put their heads down and work. What was that like for you, either becoming more influential, or were you always extroverted? Were you kind of born that way, or did you happen? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I absolutely think I was extroverted. When I think about myself as a younger kid, I was always described as the social butterfly. I was always essentially networking even in my class, right? If I was ever in trouble at school, it's because I'd finish my work and then I'd be bothering people and trying to make friends and do other things. And I think it's funny because the introvert extrovert thing is, I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not sitting here trying to lay down like some hard brain science. But one of the things I have found is I think sometimes people mix up extroversion and introversion with social awkwardness. And I am a very socially awkward extrovert. And so, extroverts get energy from being around other people. I go to conferences and I'm completely energized and I want to keep doing it. Eventually I get tired. I'm like I said, I'm 52, but I am energized by externally vocalizing what I want to do, by drawing on whiteboards, by sitting in meetings with large groups. My husband is an introvert. He would rather be in small, more intimate settings. He's not as much of a vocalizer of things. But he's also not socially awkward where I am, where I am extroverted, but I'm always nervous about how people are judging me or what they're thinking about me, which makes being an extrovert a little harder.
Yeah.
But I think I've always been an extrovert. And because of that, I want to meet people. I want to understand them. I'm also a helper. Like, I've done the Enneagram assessment and my leadership style is helper. My main number one goal is how can I help you? How can I enable you to do something awesome? That is where I get a lot of my like joy and energy from. And so I think that ends up serving me well and did serve me well as an agile coach, as a scrum master. Because all I ever wanted was for people to love their jobs and be proud of their work and be effective. And Agile was just a vehicle for saying, hey, how do we communicate better? How do we stay aligned so that people aren't just doing stuff, they're doing the right stuff and they're putting their energy behind the right things. And so it felt like such a perfect marriage of being an extrovert, being with a lot of people, being a helper, and being an enabler. Like that's what those things did for me. But to your point, like people come at it from a very different perspective. And I always focused when I talk about Agile about the outcomes, right? It's about alignment. It's about elevation. It's about making work visible. It wasn't about the ceremonies or the scrums or the metrics. Like those were just the means to the end.
Yes.
And sometimes we're not. Sometimes got in the way.
Yeah, you mentioned something so important there that Agile for many people could be the vehicle between that old tech career, that old introverted stereotype, and coming out of their shell a little bit and realizing that extroversion is not just about being a people person, or it's not some rare quality that you have to be born with, but as a function of doing the role, you kind of have to get a little bit better at putting yourself out there. And you realize that you're putting your ideas out there, because Agile has very few definitions. This is what the industry struggle with so much, is people try to create certification courses out of something that's really hard to quantify and qualify. Agile's about the spirit of a bunch of principles. Their implementation can be really fluid and very different from situation to situation. Being able to get in front of people and to stir something up, to get people moving together, begins with not your inherent introversion or extroversion, but rather your desire to help, to make impact. If we can start there, you want to make change? Well, unfortunately, there's a necessary thing you're going to have to jump into the deep end of the pool with, and that's explaining to other people why. Because the how they can look up.
Right.
But the why of doing things differently, the why of moving your own cheese, the why of stretching and doing things that are uncomfortable, not because they're different, but because they work. That's a hard sell. It's a difficult conversation to be in. And the first question I get from a lot of new students is, I have this one person who doesn't want to play ball. What do I do? Your desire to help is the foundation for all the skills that you need to get better at moving that person, getting hold of their heart and being able to move them a bit. Yeah. So that's important for people listening to this story, is that you don't have to be a natural extrovert to find a job in the age of AI. You don't have to be a natural extrovert to do well as an Agile coach or Scrum Master, and you don't have to be an extrovert to evolve from that role into whatever comes next. You have to start with your desire to help and to make impact, because you admitted yourself you're an awkward extrovert. Doesn't come naturally to you. You had to work on it and develop it. And Agile is such a great springboard for that. Now, you didn't mention what Red Foundry does. What's the nature of your company's business?
Yeah. So Red Foundry is a digital agency based in Chicago. So we do primarily web and mobile, but that web and mobile is all meant to enable small, medium, even some larger size businesses to create platforms for their customers and the people they serve.
Nice. Very well put. Now, let's talk about AI for a minute, because we've been talking about it. Everybody's talking about it, but it sounds like you have some experience with it. You've seen the impacts of it firsthand. You might have even seen enough implementation of it to know what works and what doesn't. If you could advise companies strategizing AI right now, given that it's new, given that it's in flux and will change, and a lot of things are in the, shall we call it, the mayhem phase, right? The pure chaos. But eventually it's going to settle down. Clear champions will be crowned, and we'll have more standardized implementations. The road ahead will be clear. But what do you know already about the right way to work with AI in 2026?
Oh my gosh. I think for me, what I've experienced as the right way is to be really thoughtful about what are the outcomes that you're trying to drive, and figure out how AI can plug into and enable that outcome rather than AI being the outcome. Even when I was at Microsoft, we witnessed a lot of agencies and teams that were just looking to get AI out there, and really the goal was to use it, but they didn't necessarily have a long-term thoughtful strategy as to what it was going to drive and what it was going to enable. And so you get it out there, and then you start to witness and experience the chaos and the mayhem, and now you don't have a plan. And so one of the things we've been doing at Red Foundry that I really, really appreciated is that we've been taking a slower approach than a lot of companies. We're certainly leveraging it. All of our team members are experimenting with it in super responsible and well-bounded ways. And we decided early on that AI was not going to be something for us that was a cost saver, a restrictor, something that would help us to contract things, even if those things are things that feel good, like contracting your costs or contracting risk.
Sure.
We looked at it more as an enabler. We don't want to take away the things that give our teams joy and the experiences that make our clients happy, which is a lot of the human interactions, the interactive problem solving, the bringing new exciting solutions to life, and asking what if, right? That dreaming is something that we get to do with our customers, and that customers really appreciate about us, is that we're not afraid to dream big with them. And we're trying to figure out, how does AI help with that? We don't want it to replace people. We don't want it to replace valuable experiences. What we want to figure out is, how does it replace some of those things that at the end of the day need to be done, but aren't truly the high value add in terms of what the customer experiences or sees or feels.
Yes.
And I think that's been the thing that feels a little different, right? When I'm out on LinkedIn, you see a lot of layoffs, companies that are trying to restrict the costs of people so that they can spend more money on AI, or they're talking about, how do I save time? How do I save money? And to me, it just feels like you're limiting. Like, why are you contracting when you could use AI to grow and do more? Why are you focusing so much on doing less? And that's been interesting, but I understand, right? That there's a lot of hype and a lot of popularity of how savings is really at the forefront. Whereas I feel like, man, growth and enablement needs to be at the forefront, as well as just responsible use. That's a big part of it too.
And saving should be confined to saving on things that add no value when we do them. So nobody complains. Like if I call you today, I don't have to go over to a switchboard and make sure I'm inserting plugs into the right sockets and doing all those things, or even a rotary dial phone sitting, if you remember those.
Yep.
Where you had to spin it with your finger and wait for it to uncoil all the way back. And you dreaded a number with a lot of 8s or 9s or 0s in it because it took forever. Those kinds of things, nobody's like, I wish we had that back, because there was just so much value in doing it yourself. There wasn't. It was a technical limitation. When we learn to automate or overcome it, the world is a little bit more efficient. We don't miss those jobs. We can focus on the conversation that we're having rather than the mechanics of connecting it. That makes sense as a good use case for AI. So I think we're saying the same thing. It's not going anywhere, and it's not necessarily bad, but we have to choose carefully what we do with it. And end-to-end workflows that help facilitate an outcome where human intervention doesn't really help things or make them better. It just costs more time. Those are great candidates for automation or ultimate replacement with AI. But the human factor of what we do, engaging with a customer, brainstorming for a customer, you can't fully replace. Partly because AI is based on a body of data that is known. And if you're going to help your clients innovate and explore, by definition, they might be venturing into something that's never been done and therefore isn't known. And AI can usually, it doesn't do a great job right now of extrapolating new things out of old data, coming up with really valid and viable combinations. Until it does, that's still going to be a key factor of engaging with our clients. And by the way, there's something to be said about having someone like you on the other end of the line that cares. So my next question, really my last question, is what can people do across all the things we've spoken about today? There's a common thread running through of authenticity, human interaction and caring, building community inward and then outward as a way to make life more navigable in this time of really great change. What can people do, taking your examples, to make the world of work and hiring better?
Oh man, when I was thinking about this question coming into it, and I think it goes back to what I said in the beginning, which is just be real, be human, be a representative of what you want people to experience when they work with you. Don't curate it. Don't use AI to try to come up with, catchy phrases or optimized language, because, people can smell that 100 miles away. And again, it's gonna turn away people who look for those things, people who thrive in environments that are humane and creative. And, sometimes we're not the most efficient. We don't move the fastest, but we do the right things. And so I always want to lead with language and actions that represent what people can expect at our company if they work for us, or even if they work with us as a client. And so, I know there's a lot of draw to use AI to spam LinkedIn and whatever other vehicles you're using to get the word out. But I don't think that's putting our best foot forward. And it almost creates a numbness where, people just, as soon as they even smell that it might be AI, they tune out and they stop listening and they disengage. And, I'm looking to how do we double down on engagement now? Because it's more important than ever, I feel like, to make sure we're keeping that human connection. And I get it. There's large companies where some of the work is transactional. Some of the work doesn't necessarily require that, but that's not where I work and that's not what I want to do. And I want to make sure that the people that we're working with share our values, because that's going to create the best impact and the best experiences.
I think your message gives a lot of hope, because something I felt for a long time is that the companies that could afford to hire Agile coaches and not really balk at or ask questions about where that investment was returning, they're no longer looking at Agile coaches. They're just not. Yeah. They just don't want to invest there anymore. So they're not going to. So you can want to work for a bank or an insurance company all day long. They may not be hiring folks like you. But when you look at companies that are looking to make a real difference, I think what we do has never been more relevant. And I think they're looking to learn from us, not just in tech development and deployment, but in all areas of their business. How can we get to more value, not only more quickly, but more safely? How can we make better stuff, hopefully faster, and put it in the hands of people who need it when they need it? I think there's still a ton of room for agility to thrive there. And I think the kinds of career shifts that you made, going from big mega monolith companies to companies that really understand and thrive on that human connection. In fact, that's what your customers probably pay you for. is the humanity and the service levels that they get from you. I think that's where the future of Agile happens to live. But let me ask you, any final thoughts, anything you really want people to know? If this was the last time you ever went public with anything, what would you want to leave behind for all the listeners of the world?
I love that you used the word hope, and I really appreciate that, because while I don't have a crystal ball, and I'm not going to sit back and pretend I know exactly where AI is going and what the world is going to be like in 6 months, let alone 6 years. But hope absolutely is the message I want people to walk away from. There's a lot of hype right now around AI and what it's going to save and what it's going to do, but at the end of the day, it's change. And one of the things that most every agile person that I've ever spent time nerding out with is really passionate about, it's shepherding people through change, whether that's change of process, change of tools, change of culture. It's what we do, right? We look for the smells, we look for the things where we can dig in and roll up our sleeves and get extra vulnerable and human and help people through that messy change. And AI is absolutely going to be messy change, regardless of how or what people use it for. And I think there's so much opportunity for us. But in some cases, it may not be served up on a silver platter with a job profile that says we need an agile change maker to help us adopt AI. We may have to look for those opportunities or even make them through networking and talking about what we do and the problems we solve rather than what role we've had.
That's very true. And well said, by the way. You came across the internet, to me, you popped out like a breath of fresh air. It was noticeable instantly that you were coming across with a different vibe, a different mindset, different approach that was not only humane, but it was welcoming. And I just thought it was so refreshing, like we needed it right now. And I want other people to learn from your path that when you do things, you create, expectedly or unexpectedly, you create those ripples, that impact that all of us are really looking to make. And so I want to encourage people, if you have an authentic voice and something to say, something that you know would work better, get out there and say it. Don't worry about what other people think of you. Don't worry about what the big corporations would allow or disallow. Speak the thing. Say the thing that you really want to say, because that's where your niche is. That's where your offering is. And it might take a little longer to find the place where you belong, but finding a place where you belong is so critical to not burning out, enjoying what you do, feeling the impact of what you make on the people that you make it for is so incredibly important. Anything I missed? Anything that you want to cover just before we wrap up?
Oh my gosh. I don't think there's really anything big that you missed. I feel like we hit a lot of good points. And I do want to double down on the thing you just said, which is, don't go out there and contribute to the AI echo chamber. Like, say what's in your heart. And actually, I'm gonna steal a quote from someone. And God, I apologize because I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but she was this amazing brand consultant. And one of the things that I was at a leadership retreat a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things she said that really stuck with me is write about the things that cause commotion in your heart. Write about the things that you're passionate about, because it's going to attract the attention and the connection with people who share your values and share your ideals. And it will help create an environment that you want to be, you want to see expand, that you want to be surrounded with. And I just loved that. And it inspired me to start thinking about, how do I get back out there? I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. Lately, it's been a lot of reposting jobs, but I need to start writing about the things that are creating commotion in my heart again, because I used to be pretty vocal about those things. And I think I've gotten kind of quiet in the deluge of AI that's been out there.
I hope to see more of it, because like I said, it was really inspiring and it created a connection that didn't exist before. Out of thin air, we never would have met otherwise. So definitely keep doing it. And it's also a reminder that the thing that scares you the most, the thing that you avoid most often, that you say, yeah, one day I should, but you don't do it. That's a clear sign. That's your instinct telling you that's the thing you need to do next. So don't let the thing being scary or foreign or unusual keep you from doing it and doing it now. My friend, it was really great to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for jumping on out of the blue with a complete stranger. Where can people find your work?
Um, Honestly, like if you want to look me up on LinkedIn, please do it. Angela Dugan, based in Chicago, Red Foundry. What I always tell people is if you are going to connect to me, especially if you listen to this podcast, please include a note that tells me how, so that I know. It also gives us a good springboard for conversation. But I do spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. I love looking at the notifications feed because it
Mm.
lets me know. You mentioned this earlier. It lets me know who's got a new job, who got a promotion, who might be looking for a job. It's how I keep my connections warm and how I make sure people know that, I'm thinking about them and I'm in their corner and I'm rooting for them. And it helps to create that network that can be the safety net you need when things are tough. So LinkedIn is a great place to find me. Often my blog posts end up there anyway. I'm at Red Foundry in Chicago. So you can also find me, I should mention this, you can also usually find me at any of the local community events, local conferences. I try to help organize things that are kind of the community-based ones. I'm pretty involved in VS Live as a conference. You can often see me speaking at those conferences, networking, meeting people there as well.
Wonderful. And thank you for the work that you do. Thanks for doing it the way you do it, because I think it's so important. It puts a spotlight on the kinds of behaviors that I think, you can say the agile coaching role is dead, and maybe someday AI will be dead, just like NFTs are kind of dead. Trends come and go, but what remains and what stays consistent are those human qualities of helping and making impact, making connection and influencing people and helping them reach their highest, level of performance or career level, whatever it may be. I think that sustains and remains no matter what else changes around us. And it was so, like I said, refreshing to see you articulate that in public. And I hope it brings you a lot of joy. I hope it brings you a lot of success too. Angela, thank you so much for being on my show.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. It has been wonderful and delightful to talk to you. And I'm so grateful that you recognized the value of being humane and human right now.
Thank you so much for saying that. I appreciate that. Friends, you'll see the coordinates if you want to reach Angela in the show notes below. That's Dugan with 1G, and the company name is Red Foundry. So do check her out, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Angela, best of luck with everything, and let's stay in touch, and let's do this again sometime.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care, my friend. I enjoy conversations like this so much, and I hope you enjoyed it too. In fact, I hope more people, especially people in human capital or human resources, can learn something from this model of recruiting and engaging the public to build better companies. You can find Angela and me in the coordinates in the show notes below. Thank you for listening today. More to come. Until next time, stay badass.